Hello everyone, good evening, welcome to the show. My name's Merlin Fulcher. It's Thursday the 23rd of April. 23rd of April, it's also St George's Day, which is a historic day. It's the saint's day of the patron saint of England. Typically it's a day when people don't really know what to do or how to mark a day like this, so perhaps it's quite fitting that we're in this extraordinary lockdown scenario. We can come up with some new ways of marking this day. Funny fact, it's Shakespeare's birthday. It's also the day Shakespeare died, which is a bizarre thing. He's somebody who was born and died on the same day, which is also St George's Day, another unusual thing. But the reason I'm mentioning this is St George's Hospital. So I'm creating this video here in Tooting. St George's Hospital is in Tooting. It's huge. It's the biggest hospital in the country. It's a teaching hospital. It employs absolutely loads of people. It's also where I was born. I'd say I'm a big fan of St George's Hospital. I think it's really great. And this evening is Thursday, so we were doing the clap for carers. So everybody in the street here was leaning out their windows, standing in front of their houses, banging pots, clapping, whooping, doing everything we could. And we were clapping for everybody, for all the NHS, healthcare, care workers across the country, everybody who's doing everything they can, putting themselves in the front line of this battle against the virus. Obviously clapping for all the people working in St George's, because you can pretty much see the hospital on the horizon just over there. But also clapping for everybody else as well, the emergency service workers, clapping for the farmers out there, the food processors, the shopkeepers, the delivery drivers, and also just solidarity with everybody here, really give everybody a big boost. So I think that was a really good thing for everyone this evening, and we're going to keep on doing it. Earlier today, obviously I've been following the news, and we're still in this lockdown situation, but some really interesting stuff happened in terms of what we were hearing, and particularly on the sort of daytime television news. Around about lunchtime there's a press conference with the First Minister of Scotland, and her name is Nicola Sturgeon. So this is a really, I think, quite helpful press conference, because it's happening every single day, but it's happening about 5 hours before the UK government does its press conference. And in this one, typically the Scottish government are giving us a bit of a sneak peek of what we might hear from Westminster, but also going a bit further, which is pretty bold. And in this one today, there was a whole report, and this report was all to do with how Scotland will move on from the present situation. Now I say move on, but actually the report effectively, it said some of these measures will be in place until next year. Okay, and we kind of heard that. We know that it's going to take about a year at the very least to deliver some kind of vaccine or drug treatment program. So in Scotland, these measures are going to be in place for a year. But also, that is a big deal to think. Okay, this is going to go on for a year. This is the way we're living now. All parts of it, all very key parts of it. And she's saying the country, Scotland, will have to adapt to a new reality in the future. I think that's an interesting wording, because I think a lot of people have adapted. We've been in this situation for a month now. So I think really what they're saying is what you have adapted to is the future. Which again, I mean, that's big, because effectively the broad way of what we're doing here, social distancing, working from home, avoiding big gatherings, staying 2 meters away from people, washing your hands, that's the new future. And it goes on in the speech. Effectively, she said there'll be no immediate return to how things were, and instead there's going to be a managed transition away from current restrictions. And they said in that report there's some really, really interesting stuff. So it says, for example, offices could reopen, people can go back to work, but they will need to stay 2 meters apart from each other. And there are design implications, and then some of these spaces will have to change. Schools, and it actually says this in the report, schools may need to be redesigned. It may not be that all children can go back to school at the same time. They'll need to be able to keep the children 2 meters apart. I mean, that's fascinating, because that suggests not just a short term, but a kind of medium term response, which is going into the sort of scale of months and years, if not, and saying that that could be where Scotland's going. But I think that's also very interesting, because obviously Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. Scotland's facing the same situation as the rest of the United Kingdom, pretty much, getting very similar scientific advice. So I think in a way what we're hearing in Scotland is a good hint of what we're going to be hearing as recommendations for England and also the other parts of the United Kingdom. So I think that was quite an illuminating press conference. But so later in the afternoon at 5 p.m, it was the UK government's turn to do its press conference. And what did we hear in that press conference? Well, unfortunately, so the question was put by journalists. They said, well, this is what Scotland said, so what are you going to say? And the person who was leading that press conference, their response was effectively, it's too early to discuss the sort of what the ending or the moving forward from the lockdown might look like. And by doing so, this might change behaviours, might send the wrong message to people across the United Kingdom. And effectively, I kind of knew that would be the response. That's been quite a stock response that we've been hearing for about a week now to this question. Now, the person who made that response, it wasn't Boris Johnson. He's still recovering. But I used this slide here showing Boris Johnson in one of those earlier conferences of the coronavirus crisis. Because this response that we had this afternoon from the UK government reminded me a lot of what we were hearing from Boris Johnson in mid-March and mid to late March, which before the lockdown came in. He was frequently asked, when will these shutdown restrictions that we're seeing in other parts of Europe be brought in to the UK? And what he consistently said was that we have to be careful not to introduce the lockdown too early, because people will get fatigued, people will get tired, and so if we introduce this lockdown now, we have to face the reality that they'll kick back against it, they'll start doing all the things they used to do, and then the whole purpose of the lockdown will fail, because just as we need people to be reining things in, they'll lose patience, they'll go out, and then the number of cases and sadly deaths will spike. Now what's really interesting, so that was said loads of times, but the thing is, we're now in this situation, we've been in this situation for a month, and I'm not really getting any sign of people losing patience. If anything, it's the opposite. I think if anything, people are actually working out how to live with this routine, working out that there are ways they can still be happy and they can still communicate with people. So obviously it's not perfect, no one likes this is not great, but there's certainly the idea that there's fatigue. I don't know, I think that really people adapt quite quickly, and so I think that is interesting, because it kind of begs the question, what was the real truth behind what Boris Johnson was saying at the time? And the kind of fear is that really it wasn't to do with fatigue, and it was more to do with this idea of the economic impact of the lockdown. Now, the economic impact of the lockdown is real and massive. It's a huge issue, and it will undoubtedly overshadow this early stage of the coronavirus crisis. As Angela Merkel said, we're only at the beginning of this crisis, and the crisis will be compounded by the recession that's coming. And this is real. There's no way of avoiding it. And the thing is, and it's totally valid for a government to be concerned about it. That's what they should be concerned about. However, it's also very important to be clear and direct and honest and with your motivations in decision making. And I think it sets a bad precedent when these things are blurred. And I think when we're told that you cannot discuss the ending of the lockdown because it might change behaviour or something like that, I think that we need certainty that that really is the reason why we're not hearing this discussed. We know that really the driver behind the lockdown is public opinion. Is the public demanded the lockdown and the government responded. That's the reason we're in this situation. So, it'd be interesting to know why the UK government broadly doesn't think the public cannot hear the reality, this new reality. When again, in yesterday's programme, we were hearing that 9% of people actually would want things to return to how they are. So I think when you've got the Scottish government saying stuff like, but pubs might reopen, but pubs can't have big gatherings. We can't have big gatherings, but maybe people can sit 2 meters apart, a bit like they're doing in Sweden right now, where controversially there hasn't been a lockdown at all. So I'm a bit concerned about that, and I hope that the UK government as a whole doesn't have a kind of lack in the ability of the people, because I think everybody here has shown themselves admirably to be totally brilliant in their response to this, and no sign of that changing. And certainly when it comes to unrest and other things, the only thing that would possibly cause that and this was made very clear in a SAGE government report, is the idea that the government itself isn't really handling the crisis well. I think for the most part, people feel the government is handling the crisis well, but for a small number of people at the front line of the fight against this disease, they probably think differently, especially when it comes to testing and access to protective clothing. But I think they need to be careful to keep the message clear, simple and direct and honest. So anyway, still getting out, still having a good bit of exercise in the park every day. And one of the things that I think a lot of us encounter, you're walking along a pavement and suddenly there's someone there and you think, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? This pavement's tiny. I would like to give them more space or have more space for myself. Okay, that's totally valid. That's something we all want to do because we're supposed to be staying at least 2 meters apart from each other. Fine. But what do you do? And where my local council, Wandsworth Council, recently tweeted this sort of public information slide, and they're saying effectively what they're saying is, if you're in this situation, just look around very carefully and step in the road. And I mean, in some ways, I've done that. I've done that many times actually. And I'm a cyclist. I drive. I take road safety extremely seriously. I look very, very carefully, and I step into the road. The roads are really empty right now, and certainly if you're on a residential street or anywhere, it's pretty easy to do this. And in some ways, I think the council, I think in a way it's good to sort of say this to people and just say, look, use your initiative, be practical, and if you can help like an elderly man like this and give him the space that he needs and keep him safe, then do it. I think this falls down slightly in that this is a public information campaign just for pedestrians. And I think that it probably would be good to have a corresponding one also for drivers, to say to drivers, look, we're in this extraordinary situation. You might turn around a corner and see people standing in the road. Don't be angry, don't rev your engine, slow down, be prepared to stop, deal with the situation with good humour, I mean, I would say the few times I've cycled around and walked around, there's so few drivers on the road, and the few drivers that are on the road are in very good spirits and they're very polite, and there's none of the kind of aggro and anger that you might typically have on a London road. Sadly, it does happen. That doesn't really seem to be happening, but I think Wandsworth Council really should do something also to make it clear to drivers as well that they should do everything they can to try and respect the fact that pedestrians are hemmed in and sometimes having to step out. Anyway, I think things like this, hopefully the long-term impact will be that people much more see streets as places for people, places for safety and wellness, rather than just things to drive through to get to the next yellow or red light. So I think there'll be really interesting public space implications for this, and hopefully that's something we can come back and discuss in future episodes. I want to thank everybody who subscribed following my last video. I now have doubled my number of subscribers, so I have exponential growth. Please sign up if you find it interesting, share your thoughts, and comment, tell me what you'd like to discuss, or if you disagree with anything, and look forward to chatting more about cool, interesting topics. Good night, everyone. Good night.